Hi, and welcome to An Insight Perspective, where I explore leadership insights that go beyond the obvious. If you prefer listening over reading, this space is for you. I'll be sharing my newsletter here in audio format, along with future editions. So let's dive in, my first deep dive into what's really fueling burnout and how to break the cycle. Now, burnout doesn't always announce itself, it creeps in quietly, disguising itself in your day to day. Sometimes it looks like short tempers, constant firefighting, reactive problem solving, or the feeling that you're always behind. If there's no room to step back, burnout might already be running the show. Let's look at the playbook approach to burnout and why it falls short. Now, when leaders hit a breaking point, the usual advice is to take a vacation, delegate more, create wellness blocks, or set better boundaries. These strategies can provide short term relief, but they don't address the real drivers of stress. I've seen this time and again. Leaders push through exhaustion, treating burnout as just part of the job, often fueled by underlying false narratives. Here's what we tell ourselves: I am expected to keep it together no matter what. That's why I'm in this role. Burnout isn't just about workload, it's about these hidden forces beneath the surface, the fears, expectations, and pressures we place on ourselves. Until we address those, the exhaustion returns. Let's talk about an inside perspective. What's the real cause of burnout? A leader I worked with, a seasoned executive leading a large team, came to me frustrated. He had been receiving feedback that he was becoming reactive. Now, that wasn't like him. He prided himself on being calm and composed. Yet, in recent months, he found himself frequently triggered by his team's behaviors: missed deadlines, dropped priorities, a general lack of accountability. What was his default reaction? Well, blame, frustration, and taking control. At first glance, it seemed like a team issue. But as we dug deeper, we uncovered what was really going on. He was burned out. On paper, it looked like normal stress. He had recently been promoted and had taken on two additional high stakes projects, each large enough to require its own manager. At home, he was helping his child with college applications while dealing with his own health scare after a high cholesterol diagnosis. Now, these were the visible stressors, but beneath them was something heavier. There was a relentless pressure to prove himself in his expanded role, a fear that if he didn't push hard enough, he would fail, and a belief that if things fell apart, it would be on him. This was why he was reacting the way he was. His burnout wasn't just about workload, it was actually about what the workload represented. So, how do we address burnout from the inside out? Let me share a few steps. Step one: pinpoint the biggest contributor to your burnout. When burnout hits, the instinct is to either fix everything at once or worse, make drastic changes like switching jobs or disrupting important relationships. But real progress starts with focus. Instead of tackling everything, identify the biggest source of your stress, the one fueling your exhaustion at its core. For my client, the biggest contributor was his expanded role. While personal stressors were present, work was where he was feeling most depleted. So ask yourself, what's the number one source of my stress right now? Is it work? Maybe a specific responsibility or a relationship? If I were to peel back the layers, what's really weighing in on me? Start there because that's where real change begins. Now let's look at step two. Identify the emotional trigger behind it. Once you've identified the biggest source of your stress, the next step is understanding why it's hitting you so hard. For my client, it was the fear of failure. He believed that if he wasn't constantly pushing, he would disappoint his leadership, lose credibility, or prove he wasn't ready for his new role. Remember, burnout isn't just about external pressures, it's about the internal stories we tell ourselves. And these stories are usually active in multiple parts of our lives. For this leader, for example, even a simple question at home, like who's making dinner, felt like another demand he couldn't meet, triggering frustration and unnecessary fights at home. So ask yourself, what belief is driving my stress response? Is it a need to prove myself? Fear of letting others down? A loss of control, maybe? Now let's look at step three. Use a pause to shift your response in the moment. Recognizing these triggers is powerful, but change happens in the small moments when we interrupt our patterns. For my client, we used a very simple but effective pause technique. It was a short affirmation to disrupt his stress response in the moment. The affirmation went like this: It's not all on me. That one reminder changed a lot in how he started showing up in his same external circumstances. Instead of blaming his team now for missed deadlines, he started collaborating with them to solve challenges together. Instead of carrying the weight alone on himself, he opened up to his leadership and learned that in fact they were quite happy with his performance and actually willing to step in to remove obstacles. Instead of arguing at home, he recognized that stress was distorting his reactions. And so he changed course by first acknowledging with his spouse what was going on. Now, here are some other simple ways to implement a pause. First, maybe reframe the situation. For example, if you ask yourself, if the stakes weren't so high, how might I approach this with a more creative mindset? Another technique, channel a mentor or a role model. Ask yourself, how would they handle this? Another pause technique, review your commitments. Just reflect and ask yourself, which one of my commitments are driven by fear and which ones by choice? I'll give you a hint. Fear and lack of choice are the key drivers of burnout. Finally, check in with a trusted friend, coach, or advisor for a different perspective. Even a small pause can shift your response and your reality. So before you move on, take 60 seconds to reflect on this. What's my biggest stressor right now? And what's really driving it beneath the surface? Even this small moment of awareness can be a game changer. Now, burnout isn't something you have to navigate alone. If this resonates, join me and my co facilitator Yuwen for an upcoming hands on workshop on March 14th, where we'll go deeper into these techniques and help you build a more sustainable and personalized approach to burnout recovery. You can click in the description link below and learn more and register. If this resonated with you, make sure to subscribe for future insights. And if you have thoughts or questions, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much. for listening.